Hong Kong, 1999. A bustling city known for its neon lights, endless shopping malls, and the iconic skyline above Victoria Harbour. But beneath that glittering surface, a story was unfolding that would shake the entire city to its core. A crime so brutal, so bizarre, that it would forever be remembered as one of the darkest cases in Asian true crime history. It all began with the discovery of something grotesque inside a small, cluttered apartment in the Kulon district. When police entered the flat, they were met with a smell so foul it clung to their clothes and skin. Amid the piles of trash and dirty dishes, they found something that looked innocent at first glance, a large Hello Kitty doll. But hidden inside that toy was the severed skull of a young woman. This horrifying discovery would reveal weeks of torture, abuse, and murder. And the victim was Fan Man-yee, a 23-year-old woman whose tragic life had already been marked by hardship before it was cut short in the most unimaginable way. The press would later call it the Hello Kitty murder. But behind the shocking headlines was not just a sensational crime. It was a glimpse into the darker side of Hong Kong in the late 1990s, where gangsters, drugs, and desperation intertwined. To understand the horror of the Hello Kitty murder, we first need to understand the life of its victim, Fan Man-yee. Hers was a story shaped by poverty, neglect, and vulnerability, a story far too common in the underbelly of Hong Kong during that era. Fan was born in 1976, and from the very beginning, her life was marked by instability. Abandoned by her family at a young age, she grew up in an orphanage. Like many children who grew up without parental guidance or stability, she struggled to find her place in society. By her teenage years, she was already battling addiction, particularly to drugs, which left her desperate for money. At 15, Fan began working as a hostess and later as a sex worker in Hong Kong's bustling nightlife scene. It wasn't glamorous, it was survival. The late 1990s were a turbulent time for Hong Kong. The city had just returned to Chinese sovereignty in 1997, and beneath its economic rise, there was also social unrest, a booming drug trade, and the growing power of triads. Vulnerable women like Fan often became entangled in this dangerous world. By her early 20s, Fan was married and had a young child, but her marriage was troubled, strained by financial struggles and her ongoing addiction. She tried to make ends meet, often working in nightclubs frequented by gangsters and drug dealers. It was in this world of neon lights and shadows that she crossed paths with Chan Man-yee, a man whose involvement in drugs and organized crime would seal her fate. For Fan, life had been a series of struggles, but nothing could have prepared her for the nightmare that was about to begin once she fell into Chan's grip. It started with a mistake, a desperate act that would cost Fan Man-yee her life. Sometime in early 1999, Fan became involved with Chan Man-yee, a mid-level gangster and drug dealer nearly 20 years her senior. She owed him money, and in a reckless moment, she stole his wallet. Inside was a few thousand Hong Kong dollars, not a fortune, but enough for Chan to decide she needed to be punished. Instead of reporting her to the police, Chan sought revenge in his own way. With the help of two younger associates, he tracked Fan down. In March of that year, they abducted her from the streets of Kowloon. Fan was dragged into an apartment on Granville Road in the Tsim Sha Tsui district. From the outside, the building looked like any other aging block in the crowded neighborhood. But inside, it would become a chamber of horrors. For Chan and his accomplices, the plan was not immediate murder. They wanted to teach her a lesson, to make her suffer for daring to cross a triad-linked dealer. What began as punishment soon spiraled into weeks of sadistic torture. Fan was chained, beaten, and confined to one of the small, filthy rooms of the apartment. The men forced her into humiliating acts, laughed at her pain, and treated her suffering as a form of entertainment. To them, she was no longer a person, but an object of control, a way to assert power in a world where violence was currency. This was no longer about the money she had stolen. It was about domination. And Fawn's nightmare inside that Kowloon flat was only just beginning. What was meant to be a short punishment soon descended into unimaginable cruelty. For nearly a month, Fan Man-yee endured daily abuse inside that cramped Kowloon apartment. The men treated her suffering like a twisted game. She was beaten with metal bars and household objects, burned with melted plastic, and forced to ingest substances that made her violently ill. Sometimes, she was denied food for days. Other times, she was forced to eat scraps laced with spices or drugs, turning her pain into their amusement. The torture was not hidden in secrecy. It became routine. Neighbors in the building later admitted they heard disturbing sounds at night, screams, crying, and loud thuds echoing through the walls. But in a city where fear of gangsters was real, people looked the other way. No one dared to interfere. For Fan, there was no escape. Chained and weakened, her body was deteriorating, yet the torment continued. At times, the men even involved a teenage girl, an acquaintance of theirs, forcing her to witness or participate in the abuse, as if normalizing cruelty. By late April 1999, after weeks of relentless brutality, Fan's body could no longer endure. Malnourished, injured, and psychologically shattered, she finally succumbed to her injuries. But even death did not end her suffering. For the men who held her captive, her corpse became the next object of desecration. After Fan Man-yee's death in April 1999, the horror did not stop. Her captors, fearing the consequences of murder, decided to dispose of her remains in a way that revealed the depths of their depravity. Her body was dismembered, some parts were boiled in pots, others discarded as if reducing her to nothing more than refuse. But her skull, the last evidence of her existence, was hidden in a place both grotesque and symbolic. The men stuffed it inside a large plush Hello Kitty doll that sat in the apartment. For weeks, no one outside knew what had happened. Fan was simply missing. Her absence might have gone unnoticed longer if not for an unexpected turn: the teenage girl who had witnessed the crimes. Traumatized and haunted by what she had seen, she eventually went to the police, confessing everything she had endured inside that apartment. At first, authorities found the story almost too horrific to believe. But when they raided the Kowloon flat, the reality was worse than any nightmare. The smell of decay still clung to the rooms, and in the cluttered mess, they found it: the Hello Kitty doll with a human skull hidden inside. The discovery stunned not only Hong Kong, but the world. It was a crime that fused the innocence of childhood imagery with the brutality of human cruelty, creating a scene that was both surreal and unforgettable. From that moment forward, the case was cemented in headlines as the Hello Kitty murder. When the case finally reached court in 2000, Hong Kong was transfixed. The details that emerged were so disturbing that journalists called it one of the most gruesome murder trials in the city's history. 3 men were charged: Chan Man-lok, the triad member who orchestrated the kidnapping, and his 2 younger accomplices, Liang Wai-lan and Young Shing Choi. They were not accused of simple manslaughter. Prosecutors argued it was calculated, sadistic murder. The most important testimony came from the teenage girl who had been present during the month-long ordeal. She recounted in chilling detail the beatings, the torture, and the final hours of Fan Man-yee. Her words painted a picture of unrelenting cruelty, and though the defense tried to discredit her, the consistency of her account matched the forensic evidence found in the apartment. Still, there was a legal complication. Because Fan's exact cause of death could not be determined, her body having been dismembered and destroyed, prosecutors struggled to prove premeditated murder beyond reasonable doubt. In the end, the jury delivered a compromise. The three men were convicted of manslaughter, not murder, but with a charge of preventing lawful burial added to reflect the desecration of Fan's body. They were sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after serving at least 20 years. The ruling was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as justice, others felt it was far too lenient given the unimaginable suffering Fan endured. The trial revealed not only the brutality of the crime, but also the legal limits of Hong Kong's justice system, where proving intent in cases without a complete body can mean the difference between murder and manslaughter. The Hello Kitty murder was more than a crime, it became a cultural scar. In the years that followed the 2000 trial, Hong Kong society wrestled with what it had witnessed. The brutality was so extreme that it seemed to cross into the realm of horror fiction, yet it was tragically real. For the public, the case shattered a sense of safety. It highlighted how gang culture, drug addiction, and social neglect could combine to create unimaginable violence. Fan Man-yee was not just a victim of her killers, but also of a society that had long ignored people like her, women struggling with poverty and addiction in the city's shadows. Internationally, the case gained infamy under the name Hello Kitty murder, forever linking the innocent, childlike image of the Japanese doll with unspeakable cruelty. For years afterward, many people associated Hello Kitty not with cuteness, but with horror. In fact, this collision of innocence and evil made the story so unforgettable. It inspired books, documentaries, and even horror films loosely based on the events. In Hong Kong, the apartment on Granville Road became a symbol of dread. Locals whispered about it as a haunted place, claiming strange noises and ghostly presences lingered long after the crime. Even today, more than 2 decades later, the name Hello Kitty murder still chills anyone who remembers the headlines. The legacy of the case is twofold: a reminder of the darkest sides of humanity, and a tragic symbol of how the vulnerable can be consumed by violence when society turns a blind eye. Fan Man-yee's story is not only about her suffering, but also about the silence that allowed it to happen.